Hi, everybody. Welcome. As you are coming in, we're just at the top of the hour. We are going to give this about a minute here for people to roll in. So please enjoy our lovely, lovely blue photo of Manhattan. And we will start in about 45 seconds here. Okay, everyone's Outlook alert has clearly gone off. So let's get started. Welcome to another of the NCCER Grants Plus grant seeking webinars here. My name is Matt Carter. I am a senior advisor at Grants Plus. You have heard me before, and I'm actually joined by one of my colleagues today, Jeremy Ritt, who is our senior advisor for strategy, and you will see he will have some good stuff for you. So for those of you just joining for the first time, Grants Plus is a national grant seeking firm. We have helped a whole lot of clients raise about $250 million in the past 15 years. And currently we say 30 plus because we fluctuate a little bit. We are about 34 grant seeking professionals around the country right now. And we are excited to be partnering with NCCER to help all of you get more grant money to do all the great work that you are doing. So again, for those of you who've done one of these before, you've heard this, so I'll try and be quick. Our partnership, we've got multiple things going on. We've got our webinar series, which at this point has more recorded in the library than live left to do, but that is okay. We are doing monthly webinars through February. We also have a collection of pre-vetted funding opportunities for the work that you do. Same page where you signed up for this webinar, you notice at the top, there are some funding opportunities available. We are also offering one-on-one coaching sessions with any of our grants professionals. If you've got a question, you don't know where to start, you want to talk through an idea for a funder, sign up. You can have sign up for a half hour of our time and get that on our calendar. Also, we are doing drop-in office hours. We've heard some feedback that people don't necessarily have enough of a question to fill a half-hour coaching session, but just want to ask some quick questions. So we're trying out some office hours. So you should be able to get the link for those at the same place you signed up here on that landing page. Next one is tomorrow afternoon at 2 Eastern. So if you've got some quick questions, even about what we're talking about today and just want to drop in, all you do is you go to the page, you get the link, you click it during that time, Teams will come up, one of us will be in there, and you can ask us a question. And then downloadable grant seeking guides. These are great one-pagers. We've got a series of 8 of them up on that landing page that you can download for some of your questions. So a few ground rules for today. As always, ask questions at any time. Please use the Q&A function. Don't use chat. It's easier for us to follow along on the Q&A. And for our learning objectives today, we are going to talk about a couple things. We are going to learn how relationships positively impact funding. That's a fancy way to say if you know people well, you'll get more money. We'll talk about how to build those funder relationships and understand why you need a multi-year pipeline for those to really work. So with that, I am going to launch a quick poll and then I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy. And Jeremy, I should have let you say, they've heard me talk about me this time. I didn't give you a couple seconds to introduce yourself. So if you want to do that while the poll is going on, that would be great.
Sure. Hopefully I will not distract you from giving us your candid and honest answer to these questions. But as Matt said, my name is Jeremy Ritt. I am a senior advisor for strategy here at Grants Plus. More than a decade experience in nonprofit and grant seeking work, father of 2, husband of 1, and really excited about helping you understand the impact of relationships to your grant seeking.
Great, and we've got people are still answering the poll here. I think maybe we were a little distracting, so I'm going to leave this open for about another 20 seconds. And it looks like we are neck and neck. We have nobody has answered trick question. My organization doesn't get grants, so we don't have any relationships. So that's good.
That is good.
And no one has said that they don't have relationships. So interesting. All right, I'm going to end this and share really quickly. Jeremy, I'm curious if about your thoughts on the results. I'm not terribly surprised, but
I actually am surprised,
really,
but surprised in a great way. I love the fact that there are nobody on this list says my organization doesn't really have any relationships, and also pleasantly surprised that um, no one is saying that they don't get any grants. Sometimes I've had clients that have really no background in grants and they've never done it before, and so it's nice to know, which I shouldn't have expected anything different given the current relationship. But it's nice to know that there is some basis for it. I think it is somewhat interesting that um, answer 3 is lower than the response to 2. Looks like 38% of you say that your organization has a relationship with your grant makers as well as other funders. That's fantastic. Love that you're in that category. We're going to need to work with those of you that say that you have individual funders and sponsors, but not with your grant makers, because there's some nuanced differences, but they're very similar. And we'll talk about that throughout this presentation. But I am liking the fact that there is some connection, there is some tie-in to the fact that these are real people talking to real people.
all right. Well, let's talk our 2s into being 3s. I'm gonna turn it over to you here.
Yes. So why do relationships matter? We're going to start there. Unfortunately, far too many organizations sort of rely on what we call the slot machine model, as opposed to they might call it the Vegas model as well. But with the slot machine model or the Vegas model, you have a proposal. You send that proposal into the funder, and then you expect money to happen. It's a highly transactional relationship, and I sort of liken it to trying to pay your mortgage with those penny slots. Like, it's possible. Some people win every day, but they also lose their shirt, and we don't want you in that situation where you're trying to use all of that time that it would take by sort of shotgunning proposals out there. This model has no relationships, and the sort of frustrating part about it is that sometimes it does work. So it makes people think that that's what they should be doing, but that is not at all what we would consider to be best practices. What is best practices is sort of the major gifts model of grant seeking, and everything that we're going to talk to you about today supports this best practices model. And if you have you can see the little circle here, which kind of follows that solicitation cycle that is built on those relationships. It allows for that two-way communication. And it's really the basis of a long-term strategy, which is far more dependable, and it allows you to save time and effort, increases that efficiency. And, from my own personal background, I got started with an organization that was involved with counterterrorism work. And they had something, the Department of Homeland Security had something called the Consortium. And that was about 5 or 6 organizations that got a bulk of money every year guaranteed because of the relationships that they had developed with DHS, and they knew that they could rely on them to deliver. And we were in that next group down where we didn't have a guaranteed amount, but they knew who we were. We had built a track record. And so when we went out for those competitive bids and grants, we were a known entity, and we could rely more so on that being part of our revenue every year because of those relationships that we had been able to establish. And so having those relationships will allow you to more efficiently get those grant makers' attention. After today, if Matt and I do our jobs, you're going to have a better understanding of what needs to be done in order to build better funder relationships. But sometimes we don't do what we should be doing because of fear. And I just want to remind you that grant makers must give away the money to support their mission. They support those orgs who they know are doing the work and that are shaping the world in the fashion that they want it to be. And so by developing those relationships, you have a much better way than sort of two-dimensional grant proposal to communicate what it is, what you're doing. And so I want you to pause. I know your microphones aren't live, but just where you are, I just want you to mentally repeat after me. Grant makers need me. Grant makers need me. And when I say me, I mean your organization, but grant makers need me. And so we're going to move to the next slide, Matt. As we talk about educating grant makers, just want to remind you or inform you, if you didn't already know, your work ultimately creates those changes. Ultimately, you are the one doing the work to create the world that these funders want. And in your particular instance, they may not exactly see exactly how you are making that happen. But if you have that relationship, you can help them see past just those labels like vocational education. They can understand that you're helping folks develop sustainable careers, long-term success, giving them access to family supporting wages, and also helping build this country's infrastructure. Unfortunately, many funders are so focused on sort of those other methods, like a four-year college program. They don't understand that someone who completes one of your programs is oftentimes better off financially than someone who has gone to a four-year college. And so relationships can be a key factor in overcoming this and showing those funders that ultimately you are creating the world that they want to see, just maybe in a way that they haven't thought of. And it's so much easier to help shift these funder paradigms when you're having a conversation or you've developed a long-term relationship as opposed to a 5-page grant proposal. Thank you, Matt. Relationships allow for these two-way conversations, which are much more dynamic than a proposal is going to be able to be, or a proposal alone. Because I'm not saying that grant proposals are not important, but they're much more powerful when you have a relationship that can sort of allow you to help you cement that alignment between your work and that funder's priorities. In addition to what you see on the slide here, having those multi-dimensional conversations, you can quickly provide context to your points or positions, or address real or perceived challenges. And so grant proposals without the benefit of a relationship are highly reliant on the funder's interpretation of your words as written on the page. And they don't allow you to do things like get feedback on declined proposals or seek outside expertise. And so just another point for relationships. If you remember that chant that I had you do a little while back, that's all part of sort of one of my pet projects, which is helping level the power dynamics. When you have a relationship with the funder, it can do just that. It levels the playing field between you and the grantee, because at the end of the day, yes, there are two organizations and they may, be a big, deep-pocketed organization, but at that organization, there's another person who's just like you. It's two people who are working towards a common goal, not just funder and applicant or grantor and grantee. That funder, once you have that relationship, can become your partner to create the change in the world that you both want to see. We really want you to get away from seeing funders as an ATM, but more so as a partner, thought partner who has valuable input beyond the dollars that they can dedicate. When we don't do that, it makes it much more likely that we slide back to that slot machine model that we talked about before. And if nothing else, a big word for me when I was in-house working on a development team was improving efficiency, because we all know that there's way more things in the day that we have to do than time to do them. And even a surface level relationship can make you more efficient at grant seeking. It takes much less time to get on the phone to gauge interest than it does to sort of shotgun out a proposal. The longer conversations can help you learn the nuance and pick which aspect or which program that you're running that you want to focus that proposal around. And then, as I said, if you get a negative result from your proposals, if you have a relationship with someone, you can understand and ask them questions to help you understand why it was that your proposal wasn't accepted or funded, and help you determine whether or not they truly are a good fit. It might look like a good fit on paper, but having that conversation, you can know whether or not it's a not ever or maybe just not this time. Yeah.
So Jeremy, I'm gonna jump in with another poll here. If anybody has any questions for that section, I think you were pretty persuasive. I hope there's not any questions of why that's important. But I am going to launch a poll and going to remind everyone that these are anonymous, so we don't know who says what. But just checking in on how you approach grant makers when you want to apply for a proposal. And we'll give this probably 20 more seconds here. All right, we have a brave soul leading us off.
Love it.
Excellent. And we've got about half of you in. Oh, we have honesty. I love it. All right. So this is another one, and Jeremy, feel free to jump in. This is another one where I hope we're effective in getting people to change. Because the reality is 57% of you said I submit applications and hope to get funding. And yeah, that is the reality that most people live with. It is the perception of how grants should be. Yeah. And I actually just did a panel with four other grant consultants from around the world, and we kept coming back to, everybody had questions like, well, how are we going to get through the chaos that's upcoming, or how do we convince funders that we need more funding because staffing is more expensive? And we kept coming back to all of us working in different countries to, you've got to have that relationship. That is what matters.
Yeah.
And some funders don't want that. So some of you who are saying, you submit applications and hope to get funding, maybe you're dealing with funders that don't want to talk to you, and that's on them, not on you. They should want to talk to you for their own efficiency and their own due diligence. So yeah, hopefully we can convince the 57% of you to go to the person. We've got one that says they talk to grant makers even when they're not submitting, and that's where we want to get. So I don't know, Jeremy, if you've got anything to add on that.
I do, and I just wanted to, like you did, I was happy to hear you acknowledge that number is never going to be 100% on number one, because there are funders out there that in their process, they really shy away from that conversation before you actually submit. But I live in that number 3 range. I mean, there's funders or program folks at funders who I still trade like kid pictures with, and I haven't submitted to them in 3 or 4 years, because I know if and when I'm with an organization that they could possibly partner with, I'm much more likely to get them to answer the phone if I'm a known entity. Back to my example about SBC, it's about reducing the risk, because there's risk every time that they give a grant. And if they know who you are, then you're a less risky investment. And so you want to make sure that you're top of mind or near top of mind.
That risk is such a great point. And we talked about this in one of the very first ones we did with NCCER about funders, especially for your first grant, are obsessed with funding programs, not organizations, because that trust isn't there. Mm. And that is one of those ways people want to get operating money. One of those ways to do that is to have that trust and be a known entity, like you're saying, to a funder. So let's move on. Unless anybody has any other questions, or Jeremy, you want to jump in with anything, let's talk about how we actually do this. Jeremy is more expert on most of this than I am, but we don't want you to hear the same voice the whole time. So he can jump in at any point. And again, if any of you have any questions about how this actually gets done, feel free to jump in. But yeah, this is not science. This is not complicated. It's just a matter of actually doing things. So if you want to build those real relationships, Start with who you already know. You already have a relationship with your current funders. Even if your relationship is we send them a piece of paper once a year and they send us a different piece of paper that we take to our bank every year, that's still a relationship. And to Jeremy's point of grant makers need us, people give to people. That's one of those things that fundraisers, one of our cute little things that nobody finds funny except us. That is what this comes down to. People don't give to a concept. They're interested in a concept, but ultimately they give because someone asked. So people give to people. And even though a grant maker might hide behind, a website and a building and their name and a whole bunch of legal stuff, in the end, they're staffed by people. The grant decisions are made by people so far. I don't know any that are made by AI, and I dread that day. But so far, the decision on where a funder's money goes is made by people. So if you're getting funding now, if you have a funder who said no before, if you've never reached out, call, just say thank you, give them an update. I know a lot of funders, you get your money, they say in 6 months, tell us how it's going, in a year, tell us how it's going. And you've got those formal reports. Those are nice. But just check in, tell them how it's going. This gets critical too when things go wrong. We'll talk about that in a minute. So just a simple, natural, hey, I know we sent you a legal thank you letter and, the IRS has that. You need that for your 990 and all of that. But I just wanted to say thank you personally. Here's what your funding is going to do. Or, you say you were going to graduate 100 people from your program in a year. It's only 8 months in, you've already graduated your 100th person. Call them up, tell them that. Don't wait for those formal moments, because having these real conversations builds actual trust and builds real relationships. Again, you've already got a little bit of a relationship if you're sending paper back and forth. You've got a slightly better relationship if you're having good reports and you're hitting all your deadlines. You're hitting everything you said you were going to do. You're on time, under budget, and have done more than you said you were going to do. Great. But again, you're not going to build that personal relationship. So again, just these simple little touch points. Make the time to do it. It's a 3-minute conversation, and it can make a ton of difference. So how do you do that? I like to say keep your friends in the loop, and the people who are already funding you or who already care about you are your friends. So let them know when there's changes in the program. Unfortunately, this usually comes up when it's a negative change, especially lately. But you don't want to wait until that report at the end of a grant to tell them, hey, remember we said 100 people are going to graduate? Well, it was really hard to recruit, so we're only going to have 75. They need to hear that from a person. They need to hear that from you before it happens. And 99 and a half times out of 100, they're going to say, oh, we're hearing that from a lot of people. Recruitment has been tough, staffing has been tough, whatever it is. It's probably not unique to your program. And they will say, thanks for letting me know, carry on, do the best you can. That is going to be a positive thing, that is a positive in their mind about your organization versus sending a report where you don't hit your goals. The psychological difference between I had a conversation, he let me know they were having some trouble, I said that was fine, or I gave some tips about remediation, whatever that is huge, versus I got a piece of paper back that says they didn't meet their goals. So same information, different format, different outcome. Anytime you're having a big staff change, your executive director is leaving, your program director is leaving, the person that the funder had a relationship with is leaving, whatever that is, let your funders know. Again, they need to hear it from you. They need to hear it from a person. They don't want to read about it in the newspaper. They don't want to read about it when they get an email that bounces. And it's also, again, just a natural touch point. You're trying to have a real relationship. You don't want it to feel forced. You don't want it to feel like you've got, every 3 months I call Jane Smith. You want it to feel real. You don't want to have it be this artificial thing. You want it to be in response to actual things happening in the world. The other thing that is we're sort of duty bound to bring up is if there are controversies or scandals or something going on in your organization, and I know that will never happen to any of you, but I have worked for an organization before that had this happen, and they did not tell any of their grant makers. They didn't tell any of their funders. And then it showed up in the newspaper. And boy, were people pissed. Versus, hey, we had to fire our treasurer. We'll let you all fill in why. We just wanted to make sure that you knew about this before you read about it in the newspaper because it's not great. We are on top of it. Here's what we're doing. So that is, hey, something bad happened, and I, a person, am telling you, a person, that it happened, and we're not thrilled about it. Versus, hey, funder, I'm sorry you read about that in the newspaper on page 7. We weren't trying to slip something by you. We just didn't call because we don't have a relationship. So again, anytime you have something bad happen, make sure that your funders, who are your friends, hear about it from you. Not a great part to have to do in a relationship, but again, a genuine part of a relationship. We already spoiled this a little bit too, but grant makers that have said no to you are also someone you have a relationship with. They have hopefully read your proposal and didn't just like automatically decide you were a no. So always follow up when you get declined. That is, again, one of those points for a real conversation. You can even, we do have some funders that absolutely don't want that contact until you're a grantee. And even then, we've got a couple that don't want that. Sometimes the only way in is to get rejected, and then they'll talk to you. So this is, even when a funder says no, an opportunity to start your relationship or to grow your relationship. You want to find out why. Obviously, you want the information. This is, hopefully you're not in tears asking why they rejected you. Hopefully you have a nice conversation about what you could do better. And 9.5 times out of 10, you will get honest feedback. Again, this is an actual human being. If you get your rejection letter, it will always say something along the lines of, we had limited funds and so many people looking for funding. Please continue doing your great work. We're proud to be a partner with you in the community, or something like that. That tells you nothing. If you call up the funder, you've gotten to know you're not happy about it, but you call up the funder and you say, hey, what part of this didn't get funded? Why did we not make the cut? And sometimes you'll hear, we had people we've been funding for 10 years that needed extra money this year. We couldn't do any extra this year. You'll hear real feedback like, well, we had this one infuriates me, but I'm going to give you a real life example. We had a funder that was very excited about one of our clients' programs. It's a great program. They were encouraged to apply. This is a funder they have a relationship with. The funder rejected their proposal, and they were stunned. So they followed up, and the funder said, 2 of our board members were not happy that in your financial statements you had Paycheck Protection and ARPA money still on the books. They didn't feel like you needed this grant versus others, and that is super frustrating. But it also was an opportunity for this organization to connect with this foundation, have a real conversation, find out it was nothing personal, find out it was nothing operational. It was an aberration of their financials that made them not get this grant. But then they knew exactly why. And when they apply next year, they're going to be real sure to, if their financials show any kind of a surplus, absolutely proactively explain that and get out in front of it. So it is a bummer they didn't get the money this year, but they've grown the relationship in a way that they're going to be better equipped to get that money next year. So that's how you do this all, kind of with your existing, with funders, funders who are funding you, funders who you've applied to, all of that. But it's also kind of important to do this with new funders. And we've got the caveat that some funders don't want this, and that's fine. But you want to build relationships with funders from your first contact. And again, going back to Jeremy's slide, if nothing else, talking to a funder before you apply is going to make your life easier. But it's also a way where you can build real trust from the beginning. You can talk about how great your work is. You can address concerns. You can have that real two-way conversation. You can have a much better presentation of who you are, what you do, and what change you create in the world by talking to this funder beforehand than having them try to just get all of who you are and what you do through a proposal. And we write great proposals every day. And we're telling you, We would much rather you go talk to a funder than have us write the greatest proposal ever written. It's important to have both, but if you have to choose between them, I joke sometimes. I have some clients that have a good enough relationship with funders that they could take a napkin and write "need money," $15,000, and hand it to the funder, and they would probably get funding. So having that relationship is clutch, obviously, and doing that from the start is important. Because again, these are not ATMs. You are trying to bring these funders along on a journey with you. Yes, you need this grant. The one you're about to apply for, you need that money, clearly. But you want to have a long-term relationship with this funder. You want to bring them along. You want them to fall in love with your organization. You want them to fall in love with your work. And you need to do that with something. It has to start somewhere. So start with that first call or email. So how do you do that? Well, this is another one of those cute little sayings that we like to do in fundraising. If you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. So the easiest way to approach a new funder, and this doesn't always work, but the easiest way to do this is to approach a funder for advice. Ask them where they have seen something work before. Ask them about a real problem you're having. I have an example, barely de-identified here, from someone we had worked with where they were trying to expand. They were not a food bank, they were a collection of food pantries who were looking to expand into new neighborhoods, and they were not being very successful. So they went to a funder who had not funded them, but was funding the large food bank in town, and just said, hey, how do we do this? And they got really good responses, and they eventually did make this funder one of their funders, because this foundation didn't realize that they actually were not fundraising for these pantries, which is what the funder thought. They actually were providing the administrative backbone and volunteers and all of that for these pantries. So just asking, hey, how do we expand? What have you seen work? Opened this conversation. And it also gave them really good advice, because a lot of funders know what's going on. Wherever you are, the funders in town have read about probably every organization in town asking them for money at some point. They know what's going on. They're often very plugged in. And aside from this sort of mercenary conversation we're having here about start out asking for advice so eventually you get money, they probably are going to have some good thoughts for you. And, very simply, it's a very low pressure way to begin a relationship. You're not calling up asking for money. You're calling up asking how to help create change. How do we, our organization, create this thing we want to happen? How do we get over the speed bump we're experiencing? How do we fix something? How do we change something? Do you have advice? That immediately invites that funder in to be part of who you are. So that's not always going to be the case. You're not always going to have something that you can ask a funder about. So let's talk about 5 minutes to save 5 hours. And this is, again, a little bit purposefully cheesy, because we want to have something in it for you. And yes, more money, obviously, but you can save yourself hours writing a proposal or writing the wrong proposal with a 5-minute phone call, with a quick email, whatever that is. So this is still, we still recommend phone first, even though that is, 5 years ago, it was probably 80% of this was done over the phone. Now we're maybe at 50. I'll see if Jeremy rolls his eyes and goes for a lower number. But all right, Jeremy says lower. But you want to try with the phone call. So you can see on the slide, this is not complicated. It's a quick call. You introduce yourself, you introduce your organization, you say something like, hey, I noticed that the Awesome Foundation is really interested in helping transitional age youth get good careers. Guess what? That's exactly what we do, and we need your help. So you talk about what you do. You talk about how what you do is fulfilling that funder's mission. For those of you who've done other of these webinars, we've said this in every single context: phone call, application, whenever you're talking to a funder, whatever that is, talking about how you are the change they want to see in the world. And then that is usually where it ends if you have an application. But now, since you're talking to this person, you get to ask if they feel the same way. Program officer for the Awesome Foundation, I have just laid out how we do exactly what you want to do. Do you see that the same way? Does this sound like a program you're interested in? Does it sound like we are helping meet your goals? And then listen for that feedback. Really listen. Don't just sit there and scan for keywords. Listen for what they're saying. Be able to read between the lines, especially with government funders. And I don't think we've said this explicitly enough. All of this works with government funders to some degree. Sometimes when you are talking to the program contact for a government funder, you'll ask them, does this program sound like it's great, like a good fit for this program? And you'll get back something, well, I would suggest you look at page 7 of the RFP and read the second to last paragraph and see what you think. Sometimes they will not tell you, yes or no, but they will give you the breadcrumbs you need. So listen for that. Listen for between the lines sometimes, but actually listen to what they're saying. And then be prepared for a curveball. Be prepared for them to say, well, we're not really interested in transition age youth. I know our website still says that, but we're really interested right now in getting people who have been underserved by these careers or locked out of these careers into those careers. And be prepared to pivot. Oh, we do that too. We just thought that transition age youth was your focus, so I came prepared to talk about that. But let's talk about our work where we are helping women and people in career transitions come into these great jobs too. So be prepared for that. Once you've got a generally agreeable, yes, this sounds good, make sure you just confirm all of the technical stuff. The website says this should be in January 1st. Is that still correct? Based on your other giving, it looks like about a $50,000 ask would be right. Does that feel right for this time? Things like that. Confirm all those details and then thank them for their time. So now, Jeremy?
Well, I think what Matt just said right there cannot be understated. He said confirm those details and those deadlines, which shows that you've already done your homework, which
Right.
signals to that person, other person on the phone call, is that you value their time and that you're doing as much work as you possibly can so that you're taking less of their time. And that's kind of why at the beginning where Matt asked about numbers and I pointed down, just because it may be a comfortable time for you to have that conversation, it may not necessarily be the most opportune time for them to have the conversation, which is why I've sort of been sliding over towards advising that very brief introductory email asking for permission to have that brief conversation, just so that everyone involved will be ready to have that conversation and you can get the most out of that 5 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it ends up being.
That is probably more realistic, is the one paragraph email that then leads to the 15-minute Zoom call.
Yeah.
That's probably more of our new reality. But content is still the same. This is
Absolutely.
This is still your phone call, whatever the format is. This is, by the way, if you can, it is better to do this as a phone call, as a Zoom call, whatever, than a chain of emails. Because chain of emails are okay, but you're still doing that formal written communication and not doing as much relationship building there. So we've already said outright, not every funder is down with this, and that's okay. There are other ways to do this because not every funder is going to be receptive to that at all. So a lot of funders who are interested in the work you're doing are going to be showing up at meetings or conferences or events, things like that, where we're talking about the work you do. The funders that care about the work you do might be there. So it is always good to go talk with them, get a business card, have that opportunity to say, hey, we're doing some work. Is it okay if I give you a call when we all get back, when we get back to the office this afternoon, after this Zoom call, whatever that is? Is it okay for me to get in touch with you and get that yes or no? Social media. A lot of funders are also, a lot of program officers for funders, a lot of staff for funders are subject matter experts on this stuff and post on social media a lot. They're all on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the gimme, but I think they know that people look at LinkedIn for that business relationship. But follow them. It's painful to say follow them on Twitter. Follow them on Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Sign up for the email lists from that funder. A lot of times you'll get a thought piece from the funder about, why this is a crucial time to think about vocational education. And then you can send an email back that says, hey, that was such a great piece. Love what you said. Would love to talk more about how we're doing this. Get into that, whatever that is. This one does not work super well. This is a little bit of a Hail Mary. Sometimes your current funders are okay connecting you with other funders. Funders hate being the only one funding you. It doesn't always work well, but that is a not great but possible way to get to other funders. Jeremy's got a point.
It works better than the Vegas model or the
It
slot machine.
does. Okay.
Absolutely. And, there have been multiple times in my career where we had a very specific targeted group that we were helping. And, that's a small community on the program side, but also on the funder side. And so they were very excited about what we were doing. And they said, hey, we know so-and-so over at X number organization who would be very interested in going in together with us on this. And that might make your program go from being able to serve 500 people to 800 people because we can bring in this extra revenue stream, this other source, this other funder. And so instead of a 2-person team, it became a 3-organization team.
Great. And I should mention too, when you're talking with funders, generally it's a small world and they talk to each other. So even if you're not explicitly asking for those connections, they're probably talking about you behind your back to some degree. So you might as well go up front and ask for those connections. Our other Hail Mary here actually comes from a location. So where our physical offices used to be in Cleveland was in an office tower that had at least 10 foundations in it, if not more, including the largest foundation in town and the world's first community foundation, the Cleveland Foundation. We would see program officers from these funders in line at Starbucks all the time. We had a Starbucks down on the corner of the building. They would be there getting coffee. They would be there having meetings. It was an opportunity to just say hi, wave, tap on the shoulder. Hey, Jim, nice to see you, whatever that is. Just maintaining that. And it's the dumbest thing, but it works. You're still maintaining that relationship. You are still having, maybe you get to have a little chat while you're waiting for your order to be done and you find out they work for the foundation, whatever that is. But just being open to having kind of that approach of be prepared to talk about your organization, be prepared to talk about what you do and the change you make in the world, because you never know where you're going to run into a funder. So having said that, let us move into developing a multi-year pipeline, because everything I have just talked about, you cannot cram that in for every funder in 1 year and then start it all over. This is an ongoing cycle, and we always talk about how to organize this in a way that you can do it across multiple years and actually get it done. So Jeremy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, and Matt's 100% correct. I don't know that. Yes, you might be you have a set of things that you want to work on in 1 month or 1 year, but having that larger chunk of time is much better. And so we're going to get into some of the basics and how to build your pipeline. We've talked about this at multiple times, but a grants pipeline is your plan to bring that grant funding that your organization needs and honestly expects. And it's important that you have certain elements so that pipeline is functional. If your budget has X number of dollars in it, you want to make sure that pipeline is a map to get those dollars. It should have enough funders and funding to achieve your goals. You can have the best crafted pipeline in the world, but if it's only set up to raise $50,000 and your organization needs $100,000 in grants, then that's not a very good pipeline. It should also be achievable. It can include, stretch goal funders, aspirational funders is another way to describe that. But to get the bulk of the funds that you need in order to run your programs, it needs to be realistic. It's also has to be possible to be completed with the resources that you currently have. If your plan requires 50 proposal submissions, that may not work if your organization has no grant writer. And if you break it down to say, on the month level, if you are trying to get 2 large federal submissions done in 1 month, that's probably not going to be possible unless you have a whole team of people assisting to make that happen. So a good pipeline serves as an achievable work plan for your organization, and it'll help you smooth out those bumps, or at least anticipate when they're going to come. And also, this is a living, breathing document or plan. So it's always evolving, and it needs to. Your needs, your organization needs are evolving. Funders turn over. There are large scale changes sometimes that happen in the sector, and so we know that from COVID-19. And so your pipeline, your plan needs to be evolving. And some of those factors, like a COVID, might put more people who are more organizations who are learning to be a little more savvy with how they raise funds. It puts more people looking to grants to raise those funds, and so that makes it more competitive. External factors like inflation or bad economy may lead people to look for more hardier ways to raise their funds and build out their budgets. And so foundational funding is a little more resilient, and so that makes more people also in the pool and become a little more competitive. So you want to keep all of those things in mind as you're going through. Matt?
I was going to say, by the way, when COVID hit, the organizations that had good relationships with funders got that extra funding first.
Yes.
Just putting that plug in there.
And again, it goes right back to that relationships thing that we've been talking about. You're going to trust that the funds that you're investing are going to go to the proper uses, but also you actually know where to send them. I mean, if they don't know you, you're just a name in a pile of their potential grantees. And I would much rather be in the group of organizations where they have that relationship already established. But let's talk more about what goes in that pipeline, that multi-year plan. You start with the people you already know, your current funders. You want to make sure you have those reports and other stewardship items on that plan. So you start with who you have, and then you add in those potential funders that you find via research and cultivation, which we'll get into a little bit more later. And then finally, that's where you'll put in those aspirational or reach funders that you can sort of aspire to, but not forget. We don't want you to set them aside, but they are important, especially once you've got some momentum going and you've gotten some of those other wins. In terms of mechanics of your pipeline, there's a lot of different ways to do this. And, our suggestion is that you use a system that works best for you, but it's got to include both reports and submissions. The best way to get funding is to keep funding. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that you're communicating, as Matt said, very early on with your existing funders so they know what's going on. And also just good fundraising principles, like you're having touch points that aren't always about the ask. But it'll include that calendar of submissions and reports. It'll also kind of describe that connection or the relationship, building reminders so that you can have those touch points. But you want to make sure that you're tying your activities to the purpose. And you do that by ensuring that your grant funding goals are, from a yearly or annual basis are included. And you can upgrade this pipeline even further by breaking it down to maybe new funding versus renewable funding versus non-renewable funding. And once you have that mapped out, you'll see where your potential gaps and opportunities are. And the more data or information that you have in that pipeline, and the more organized you can keep it all, the more efficient you're going to be able to be in your grant seeking efforts. And that goes back into your ability to save time. Matt?
One of the places where this pipeline works best is Cincinnati, for whatever reason, has a culture amongst their funders of, if we fund you 1 year, we are not funding you next year, or some of them even the year after. So being able to have multiple years laid out where your plan is the Jones Foundation is funding us in 2020 and 2023, so something else has to happen in 21 and 22 is huge.
And it's even good for just, board presentations. So you can break down your funding sources. So the organization knows where its revenue is coming from, and you can make better decisions based on that better data that you have.
Yep.
And so when it comes to assessing funders, we like to think of three main categories. That's capacity, deadlines, and something we call openness. Time is a valuable resource, and you're probably going to want to rank or prioritize your funders in the pipeline, and they can be measured on these three factors. In terms of capacity, we're talking about funders that make grant amounts that will offset a significant portion of your expenses. That's a fancy way of saying start with those who can give you the most money. And sort of in the base level of prioritization, the funders with deadlines that are coming up the soonest are going to need to get bumped up on that priority list. You would hate to miss out on an opportunity where you are closely aligned because you missed that deadline because you had it further down on your list. And so that's one of the factors that I rank very high when I'm looking at my prioritization. And then that last one, openness, it sort of talks about their entire process. Funders that have an open submission policy and that are open to those pre-submission discussions are more attractive to work with than those that may only work on invitation only. Not saying that those that only invitation only are not still options, but that means you're going to have to do more cultivation work to get on their radar and to be invited to apply. But if they have a very open process, that's a great indication that there's going to be less time needed in order to get you across the goal line there. So let's talk about steps, some concrete steps. We told you the what, and now we want to get into some of the how of building that pipeline. And so step one, as we've said, you start with your current funders. Knowing when those renewals are due, that's sort of the backbone of any good pipeline. And then you'll work to fill in new funders around the calendar, around those existing funders, with always keeping an eye on your capacity, but also your annual goals that you have, or your monthly or quarterly, however you do it. And so you keep those two factors in. Step two would be include cultivation, reporting, and award dates. The more organized you can be, the more efficient you can be. And so having that information there, especially if it's in a format that is easy to quickly see when you're supposed to be doing something and how you're supposed to be doing something, is going to allow you to use less of your day on these tasks. Because again, we understand that this is not the only thing that you're responsible for. So step three is back to that research. Every good pipeline is fed by that funder research, and to me it's the growth engine of a healthy pipeline, and it makes you more resilient against that funder turnover, as Matt talked about. Those funders that say, if we gave to you one year, you're not going to be able to ask us again the next year. When you have those new funders, well, obviously they didn't give to you the year before, so that breathes new life, new blood into that. And then you want to make sure that you're building in time to develop those relationships with any particular funder, whether they're new or not. Love at first sight does happen, but that is a very high risk, high stakes game, and I would say the exception, not the rule, unless you are as debonair as my friend Matt. But you're going to want to invest that time and effort to build those strong relationships by cultivating those funders who have supported in the past, similar work or yours, and that match your priorities and that are easier to engage. And that's, me signaling back to those three categories that we talked about earlier. But all of that is going to take some time. So you can't just start 2 weeks before their deadline. Step four, as the slide said, it talks about parking those aspirational funders. We don't want to forget about them. We may not be ready to approach them yet, and they may not be ready to support you yet. But you want to keep them on the horizon so you have something to reach for. Hopefully we all have people who like us just as much as we like them, and they do that now. But in terms of grants, all opportunities are not equal, and the ones where the relationship is not quite right yet should be parked for future consideration or assessment, or perhaps reassessment. But we don't want you to forget about them, because goals are motivating. There may be that big national funder that you've kind of always had in your mind. I'm not saying McKinsey Scott or Bill Gates, but there are some funders that maybe your program is not well known to them yet, and you're working to get on their radar. And so we want you to include those, so you can keep that as a goal and keep working towards that. And so what does that look like? We wanted to make sure that today's talk was highly functional for you. And so what you're looking at here is a pipeline example. And it's in this example, you're kind of seeing a multi-funder look of this. We've given you a lot of theoretical tips on how to build your grants pipeline, but on this slide, you actually get to see what that might look like. And as Matt said, you can download that. He just put the link out there for you. But let's kind of look at some of these categories. And when I was talking about earlier about keeping yourself organized, we'll get to that later. But like on the notes section, that's to me very powerful because it can help you sort of know what you've done and what your next steps might be. But this chart, as you look at it, you have the funder name, and then you have the type of relationship, whether that's renewal, prospect, and then Matt, and I want you to jump in here, especially when we get to talking about the work month and outreach deadline and submission deadline, what those different things are. But like that is what I'm talking about when we were discussing about how to keep yourself organized. You not only know what you need to do, but when you are supposed to do it.
And those three columns come from hard-fought experience of if all you've got in your pipeline is the submission deadline, anytime you sort it, any funder who you don't have a deadline for is going to end up at the end and you forget about them. And you are going to be, we human beings are going to be terrible about figuring out how much time is needed to actually do this stuff. Mm-hmm. So you will look at, hey, this is due April 1st. I don't have to worry about it till March. And then it's March 15th and you're trying to build a relationship in 2 weeks. So we always use with clients, the work month is, hey, this is the month that you should start worrying about this. Our outreach deadline is you should have talked to the funder by this point. This is the goal, to have had your discussions, had your emails, whatever that is. And then submission deadline is whenever the piece of whatever it is you're submitting is due. But being able to break those out. And the work month, I think, is crucial too. We see examples where like everybody's August is dead and everybody's October is insane. So people will just move. We often will move an October grant into August or into July, knowing that there's a lull just to get it done. So balancing out that workload of knowing you've got a really rough month coming up. So let's get some stuff submitted early.
And it's also, when you look at the program or the request area, it allows you to sort of spread out that work so you know which buckets you're trying to fill. Because sometimes you can get in the trap of, I'm comfortable doing this proposal on program X. And so you keep doing proposals for program X, and then you look at the end of the year, you haven't found any program for programs A, B, and C. And so you can sort of parse out your work there, not just by deadline, but also by program. Because again, you want to tie these activities into a real life purpose, which is getting your programs funded. And so on the next slide, we go from looking at the multiple funder view to a single funder. And you can kind of see how month to month, you sort of build out those activities as you're placing those breadcrumbs as you build that relationship. And this pipeline will help you do that. So you see there, you may have a stewardship item in February. And so you make that phone call just to update them on how you're doing thus far in the grant area. Notice that's not an ask. It's not a hard and fast report that's due. It's just you doing good basic fundraising techniques and principles, making that call. But you can do that because you have this plan and you're organized, and you can get in and out of your activities. And then the next month, you have the call to discuss that apprenticeship. And so as you go from month to month, it just kind of is an organized way to help you plan out your activities.
So we're going to open up for questions, and I'm also going to launch another poll here. So if you've got any questions, oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Just before Matt launches the poll, I personally am a CRM guy. I know we're showing you and sharing with you spreadsheets, but if you already have a CRM, I'm not here to ask you to invest in the new latest and greatest technology. But if you have a CRM already and you can incorporate these concepts into your CRM platform, you're in even better shape. And it's great for continuity because one removes guesswork and boosts efficiency, but also if you have more than one person, your teammates can pick up right where you left off because you have these notes and this plan. You can kind of check things off as you go, and then the next person knows right where to pick up.
Great. That's a great point. This is just a format, but there's, you mentioned use whatever works best for you. So if you've got your CRM already, absolutely. So we have one question pop up. Okay. Thank you, Jessica. We'll chat. So for what's next, we have another webinar on post-award evaluation and grant management, which I know gives a lot of people heartache, and it doesn't need to. That is January 18th at 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Sign up for a coaching session. We've got 2 months more of availability for those. Office hours are tomorrow at 2 if you want to just have kind of a quick drop in, ask a quick question. So I will hopefully hear from a couple of you there. And with that, we are done. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining in today. You have made this much better than it would have been with just me. I very much appreciate that. And thank you all of you for attending. I'm gonna close us out here.